Hello everybody and welcome to another video. You know, there comes a time in your life where you look around at what you've got, you don your hat, head on down to the local scum bar and say to those around you, I want to be a pirate. Of course, piracy in real life isn't like the movies or the video games. It's highly illegal, it's very dangerous, there are huge risks. Risks like being shot, drowning, eaten by a shark, being shot, falling into the water, and then eaten by a shark. And of course, to top it all off, we've got all that scurvy going about, and no one wants that. Instead, it's probably much better to stay in, wrap yourself up in your favourite soft blanket on the sofa and have a lovely mug of hot chocolate. Yet, doesn't really fulfill our need for piracy, does it? You could always copy a floppy, but I don't think that's the sort of piracy we're after. Much less scurvy, though. Well, fellow men of the sea, this is where Sid Meier's Pirates sails into port. Originally released in May of 1987 for the Commodore 64, Sid Meier's Pirates was a sandbox game that put you in the role of a pirate seeking their fortune on the high seas. It was a very successful game on its original release. The open-ended approach, the approachability of the game itself made it a hit with critics and public alike. It's a title that appears frequently in lists of the best video games ever made, and it's still immensely playable to this day. Now, the original Pirates would later be ported to several platforms, including the NES, the Atari ST, the IBM PC, Mac, and Amiga. It's the Amiga version, which released in 1990, which is oft cited as the definitive version of the original game, but of course, your opinion's going to vary depending on which one you grew up with and which one you played first. For this video, we're not going to be looking at any of those original versions though. We are concerning ourselves with Pirates Gold, which is the 1993 enhanced remake, which released for MS-DOS, Amiga CD32, Windows 3 platforms, and the Sega Genesis. I'm going to be playing the Sega Genesis version, which is widely and weirdly considered to be the definitive version of Pirates Gold by many. And it's weird because it's a console port, and usually it's the home computer ports that are generally considered to be the best, so it's kind of unusual to see a console port be touted as the best version. And also, weirdly, considering this is meant to be one of the better versions of this port, I'm going to emphasise saying the word Genesis, because the game only released in North America for Sega's system. It never got a European release for the Mega Drive. Now, Pirates Gold delivered better graphics, improvements to the minigames, the world, and much like its predecessor, it was received incredibly warmly. The series would lay dormant until 2004, when it would be remade once more for the modern PC platforms at the time. Xbox 360, not the original Xbox, sorry, the PSP and Wii systems. The iOS ports would follow in around 2011. The remake would take things fully 3D. It would improve the open world by actually showing you other pirate ships on screen. It introduced a ballroom dancing minigame and other quality of life updates. This version would also go on to be critically acclaimed, except for the Wii version, which sits at a relatively low 64% on Metacritic, with the controls being cited as a major problem. I actually did play quite a lot of the 2004 remake on PC back when it came out, and I remember really enjoying it, but I've always fancied going back to one of the older versions, and decided now it's a great time to do so. So let's take a look at Pirates Gold for the Sega Genesis. First up, we need to create our pirate. We need to select the starting period to begin with. Now, our choice here does matter, because each starting period dictates the initial state of the world, and each one has its own unique advantages and disadvantages. As an example, I tried to stream this game not so long ago, and I picked a starting period named the Silver Empire. In this, 90% of the Caribbean was completely occupied by the Spanish, with very few French or English colonies to move around in, absolutely no Dutch at all. I picked an English start, but because of where I started and who was around, I couldn't really make much progress. Couldn't really do much to get myself, smooth sailing, so to speak. Now, for this video, I decided to pick the default starting period, which is known as the Buccaneer Heroes. This one seems quite fairly balanced. You've got all four nations represented in the Caribbean and fairly evenly distributed. Now next up, I need to pick my nationality. Again, your choice matters here. You have got 4 to pick from depending on your starting period. Like mentioned, the Silver Empire doesn't include the Dutch. Your options here are English, French, Spanish, and Dutch. I pick English, give myself a family name, and I pick fencing as my specialisation. Having played the 2004 version of this game, I remember the fencing being somewhat tricky, so I thought it'd be good to have a cheeky boost to it. So I'm all set up. It's time to find my fortune. We are thrown straight into the action. Rising up as part of a mutiny, we challenge the soon-to-be former captain in a swashbuckling sword fight. Naturally, we come out on top. The rest of the men pledge their allegiance, and it's off to the nearest friendly port for some grog and good times. In this playthrough, our starter port is Port Royal. It's a port run by the English. So first thing we do is go to the local tavern. We can learn the latest news here, recruit more men for our ship or fleet, and after that it's a quick trip to the governor, who tells us who the English are at war with. Lastly, we go to the merchant, where I stock up on food for the voyage. So, men recruited, state of the world learned, food restocked. Back to sailing we go. We don't really have an objective yet. The governor charged us with seeking out and destroying Spanish and Dutch ships and settlements, but we don't have to do that. We could turn our backs on the English and align ourselves with the Dutch. We could go and see what the French are up to. We could go completely rogue and terrorise everyone. There isn't a wrong thing to do, but it is important to know that your actions do and will have consequences. So for me, I'm going to do what the governor has asked me to do. I'm going to seek out enemies of the English and see where it leads me. The main bulk of the game will be spent on this sort of sailing screen. We're going to be sailing around the ocean, going from port to port, encountering ships. It's very pleasant here. It's colourful. You get a jaunty little soundtrack. It's got very little in the way of a HUD, only an icon in the bottom left which tells you at a glance the morale of your crew, and a symbol telling you if you've got full sails or not. Limitations of the time mean that you don't get to see other ships sailing around. Instead, the encounters are more akin to an old RPG random encounter. The flow starts when your dude in the crow's nest yells about spotting a sail. From here, we can investigate further or sail away. Naturally, I want to investigate further. So we learn the type of ship we're up against, the colours that it's flying. We are then given more choices. We can hail them for news, we can close in for battle, or we can just leave. Our first encounter was with an English ship, so seeing as I'm trying to be good towards the English, I decided to leave them alone. Now it's important to note that as you are sailing around, time is passing. We mentioned the crew morale earlier, and that will decrease for a few reasons, but mostly because of low food supplies. We stocked up before leaving port, but while sailing you just hit an appropriate button to go to your quarters. It's here you can see our status, the crew status, a map of the Carribean, help us in planning the journey, and like mentioned, how much food we have left, how many days worth we have left. Now onto the map. I found the map a little bit cumbersome to navigate. You scroll through locations in alphabetical order, which I guess is handy if you know the name of the port you're looking for, but it's not handy if you want to see the details of the port directly next to you. It's certainly not the worst issue in the world, but it can slow down the experience just a little bit, especially if the location you want info on happens to be on the other side of the alphabet. Still, I wonder if this is maybe a specific limitation of the version I'm playing. If I was going to be playing the PC version, would I just be able to use the cursor, the mouse cursor, to hover over a location? Still, I managed to figure out roughly where Spanish waters might be, so off we go. It doesn't take long to reach Spanish waters, and before long we flag down one of their vessels and engage in a cheeky bit of ship-to-ship combat. Like many of the game's mechanics, ship-to-ship combat is fairly simple to figure out. On one side you have the enemy ship, on the other side you have your ship. And for combat itself you just have to manoeuvre your ship around so that you're in a perfect position to hit their ship, and hopefully they miss yours. Sinking the enemy ship isn't necessarily the objective here though, because if you sink the enemy vessel, then you get no plunder, and no plunder does not a happy pirate make. Instead, what you probably want to do is damage the enemy ship just enough so that you can wear down their crew, wear down the ship itself, then you want to bring your ship straight into theirs. It'll trigger a fight between yourself and the enemy captain. Or, as is the case in this encounter, our enemy vessel was all bark, no bite. So we get close, they raise the white flag, we could either plunder them or sink it. Plunder them and sink it, or send over a few men and keep it. Now, keeping it is, of course, what you might want to do if you've got enough men, because if you have a bigger fleet, it means more options for use in battle, and also more storage for your wares. Plus, you can sell your ships at ports for more money. At the same time, like mentioned, you need to make sure you've got enough men. In fact, that is something worth mentioning here. You need to make sure you're keeping an eye on how many men you have on your crew during these sequences, because if you manage to beat the enemy captain, if you've got no crew left, you risk getting absolutely nothing. In this case, though, we can move forward with a new ship. So where now? Sail around a little bit more, get into a few more scrapes, and amass more men and plunder, until we come across the Spanish colony of Rio de la Cacha. I give the order to attack, and off we go. Attacking a fort, very much like attacking a ship, except the fort is static, it's got a lot more guns and a lot more people. Managed to damage a fort significantly enough, though, smash into it, get in a fight with the commander. I win, and we're off to plunder the goods. 8,700 gold pieces, large amount of goods, and other things taken into the fleet. It's a good day to be a pirate. Now, we're not doing too bad, so we'll go back to Port Royal to offload some of these goods. Whilst I'm there, I get myself a cheeky promotion from the governor. He gives me some info that could lead to my long-lost sister, and he introduces me to his daughter. So, we have an objective finally. Track down the long-lost sister. Onwards to Campeche. In Campeche, I find this evil duke, beat him in combat, and he gives me a map to my sister's whereabouts. No other details, unfortunately, but I figure if I look at the map, I can hopefully find an island in the world map that looks similar to it. Unfortunately, before I manage to get going, looking for my long-lost sibling, I roll my ship over an obviously marked up shallow reef, the ship sinks, and I'm shipwrecked for several months. It's frustrating, but a part of me actually kind of liked this aspect because the game didn't stop. Instead, time passes and you're rescued. You start again from like square one, but you retain that knowledge you had, so that's something at least. So we set sail again, capture ourselves another ship, and come across a promising pirate, the Admiral Lascelles, who, if he's named himself Admiral, already has quite a high opinion of himself. But I managed to capture him, and I'm told that I've actually managed to do one of the 10 pirate quests, and he gives us a little bit of information, and off we go once more. Unfortunately, this run ends fairly quickly when I stupidly try to storm another fort. I didn't keep track of my men, and I end up being thrown in jail for several months. It's less Captain Jack Sparrow and more Captain Jack Ass. But we get back to it, and I find a treasure map. That's my new objective. Sod the sister, she's long lost. She's been lost for a little bit longer. I managed to find the island marked up by the treasure map, and I land ashore. Moments later, we find the treasure. It's gold, it's silver, doubloons, 13,000 of them. I think that this is a perfect place to report back. It didn't really take me long after I started playing this to realise just how special and brilliant a game this actually is. It's got an engaging gameplay loop that is both very easy to get into but hides a lot of depth within it. There was nothing I played here that felt would be unapproachable for any sort of gamer, whether you are young or old, whether you're casual or hardcore. The game doesn't really punish you for a mistake, instead it lets you carry on and keep building your story. It's a game that I feel is truly for everyone, unless you don't like pirates, in which case, avoid it. But I truly loved it. It was graphically charming, had a neat little soundtrack, and the sandbox nature of it was not overwhelming, nor was it ever boring. I can really see why this series is so beloved, why it's continued to endure with people. I can see why it appears on lists of best games ever made, because it feels truly timeless. Sure, there may be a couple of parts of the game that haven't aged well graphically, but I think the core gameplay is certainly worth anyone's time. Now, what I played here, what I went over, was just a small taste of my experience. And what's really cool is knowing that anyone who might play this game based on this little video might have a completely different story. Whether you pick the same start as me or go for something else entirely, it will play out differently for you based on what you do. And I also genuinely think about whether you opt for the original version of Pirates, whether you go for Pirates Gold or the 2004 remake, this is absolutely a game worthy of your time. So please, do let me know below if this is a game or series you remember. Let me know if I've inspired you to check it out for yourselves. I'd love to read your thoughts. I'd love to read your memories of the game. And I'd love to read your stories about it if you do choose to play it. Now, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. And I'll see you again in a future video. Goodbye.